Evil.
Originally released in America on March 30th, 1996 for the PlayStation, re-released under the Director's Cut subtitle on September 30th, 1997, re-released again with DualShock support on September 14th, 1998, ported to the Sega Saturn on August 31st, 1997, and finally ported to the DS for some reason on February 7th, 2006. Resident Evil is the start of the classic survival horror series led by Shinji Mikami. Resident Evil was the result of producer Tokiro Fujiwara wanting to make a remake of an NES game by the name of Sweet Home, based off the movie of the same name. And after a couple of changes and hopping onto the PlayStation, the Resident Evil we know and love was born. Now, here's the thing about Resident Evil. It is probably the game that had the most differences in it depending on which version and what region the game released in. Different soundtracks, different versions of cutscenes, different modes, there's quite a lot. But honestly, there are channels like Lotus Prince that do a way better job at explaining all the differences in full, so check out the description for a link to his comparison video. I will, however, bring mention to something that amuses me a lot though. The intro of the original game is normally black and white. The American version tones down a lot of the violence and gore that's present in the Japanese version, and during the cast show-off, Chris is seen smoking in the Japanese release but isn't smoking in the American version. Now, the Director's Cut re-release was supposed to have the intro and other censored scenes completely uncut, but they just didn't do it. I don't know if they just forgot, but the Director's Cut is not actually the Director's Cut in most areas. But that's not even the dumbest part about this. The most amusing part comes in when you find out that the German and French versions of Director's Cut, as well as the PC release, not only had all the changed scenes uncut, it also had the intro in color. Meaning that not only can we see Wesker's dumb Johnny Bravo hair, but also all the blood and gore. So, like, did Capcom switch the versions on accident? Cause it doesn't make sense that Japan couldn't even get the game's intro in color, but Germany, the region that bans all kinds of violent games, especially back in the day, ends up getting it. Now, because I'm pretty terrible at segueing, I do want to make something abundantly clear. I have only played the DualShock version of this game, and that even factors for the remake. Yeah, I also haven't played that for some reason. So not only is any talk about that being postponed to another time, the DualShock version will be the version of the game I will mainly be talking about. Now, without further ado, let us reminisce on Resident Evil. After a series of murders occur on the outskirts of Raccoon City, the STARS unit of the police department are assigned to investigate. Bravo Team was sent first and disappeared. Alpha Team is sent as backup, and upon arriving they locate Bravo Team's crashed helicopter and land at the site. They're attacked by a pack of monstrous dogs, and one team member, Joseph Frost, ends up getting killed. Alpha Team's helicopter pilot, Brad Vickers, panics and takes off, leaving the remaining members Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Albert Wesker, and Barry Burton to seek refuge in a nearby abandoned mansion. Depending on which character you play as, either Chris in Jill's scenario or Barry and Chris's scenario are separated from the rest of the team. After investigating a gunshot heard further into the mansion, Wesker and Jill in Chris's scenario go missing. So it's up to Chris in his scenario and Jill alongside Barry in her scenario to find the remaining team members and escape the mansion. Over the course of the game, you'll run into the remaining members of Bravo Team. Two of the most important characters to that team are Rebecca Chambers, who can only be found in Chris's scenario and basically becomes his partner, and Enrico, the captain of Bravo Team, who reveals that one of Alpha Team's members is in fact a traitor, before being shot and killed by said traitor. Our heroes eventually stumble upon a secret lab and learn about the various experiments that were under the authority and supervision of a pharmaceutical company named Umbrella. The result of the experiments led to the creation of a highly contagious mutagen known as the T-virus, which infected nearly every living thing in the area, resulting in the zombies, zombie dogs, aggressive as crap crows, and the giant snake that was in the attic. Eventually you run into Wesker here, who reveals that he is a double agent working for Umbrella. He also reveals the main thing Umbrella was working on for years, the Tyrant, a humanoid bioweapon. and Wesker tries to get it to kill the remaining STARS members. However, Wesker gets impaled by the Tyrant's claws and is tossed aside. After shooting at a bunch, you get ready to escape, all while the lab's self-destruct system kicks in. You reach the heliport and manage to contact Brad, who actually redeems himself and comes back to save you guys, but not before the Tyrant shows up once again for the final showdown. Brad drops the rocket launcher, and with it you destroy the Tyrant for good. After this, the remaining STARS members escape the mansion and head home, though depending on how you play the game, the ending you get will be different. If Chris, Jill, and the partner character, being either Rebecca or Barry respectively, make it out alive, then you'll get the best ending, where everyone gets saved and the mansion blows up. If the character you're playing as and their partner escape, then you'll get the good ending. If Chris and Jill are the only survivors, then you'll get the bad ending, where the mansion doesn't blow up and the Tyrant is set loose roaming the forest. And if the character you're playing as is the only survivor, then you'll get the worst ending, which is the same as the bad ending, but now you're all alone. As mentioned before, there are two scenarios you can play through in this game, Chris and Jill. Chris is considered hard mode as he has less inventory space and isn't the brightest tool or the master of unlocking, so he spends more time finding various keys and help from Rebecca to solve a majority of the puzzles in this game. Jill is considered easy mode as she has more inventory space to work with, has a lockpick to get around the mansion faster, and has knowledge in more places besides shooting, so she can solve most of the puzzles by herself. Even with that being said, there are actual difficulty settings: normal, beginner, and arranged. Normal is what the original American version of Resident Evil was. Enemies did a decent chunk of damage and you got a certain amount of ammo from pickups. Beginner is what the original Japanese version of Resident Evil was. Enemies do minor damage, you get double the ammo from pickups, and enemies in general are easier to kill. Arranged is new to the director's cut version. Keys and items are in different spots, there are more enemies that take much more ammo to take out, there's different enemies in some rooms now, zombies can now run at you, most of the camera angles are different, and new set pieces can occur, like Forrest, who was pecked to death by crows in the standard game, comes back as a zombie and lunges at you. With Chris and Jill's standard scenarios combined with arranged mode, it's like playing 4 different versions of the same game, leading to a ton of replayability. But let me back up a bit here. First of all, each character has an inventory. Chris has 6 slots and Jill has 8. In this inventory, you can equip or use an item, check the item to identify it or to look for clues, or combine the item with something else. The main gameplay involves you walking or running around the mansion, shooting enemies, solving puzzles, and picking up useful items to help you with other puzzles or help you in minor ways. The big thing to keep a supply of is ammo and herbs. Herbs come in green, red, and blue, and can be used to heal you if they're green, can be combined with green to fully heal you if they're red, or in the blue herbs case, can cure poison. The big thing you'll be getting, mainly in Chris's scenario, are keys. And managing your inventory is a big part of what makes or breaks Resident Evil for some people. What ends up happening most of the time is you having too many keys or ammo and needing to waste stuff to pick up an item you need. Then there's the fact that you can only save using a typewriter, and in order to use it you need ink ribbons, which can be found either near typewriters or just in random spots throughout the mansion. There is a way to help with your clogged up inventory though. In safe rooms, you can use a magic box to store your items, and you can get them from any other box in the game, making the whole inventory kerfuffle less tedious. Last thing to point out is that this game uses tank controls, and most of the time the controls are fine, and the game as a whole operates without any problems. Other times you have this room in the lab. Okay, so to get the better endings, you need to save your teammate, who's locked up in the lab. You do this by collecting 3 discs to create the passcodes needed to unlock the door. One of them requires you to push boxes over the ducts to prevent poison gas from seeping into the room and slowly killing you, and setting up a step ladder so you can get through the air duct and get the code. Here's the problem. No matter how I positioned myself, the game wouldn't recognize that I'm trying to go through the air duct. I spent like 15 minutes in this one room just trying to angle myself and redoing the puzzle and walking up the step ladder at different angles, all so I can get in and get was the last code for me to get. My boy Chris needs me, and the game won't let me go into an air duct of all things. So yeah, moments like these, pretty dumb. Most of the time though, game works just fine if a bit clunky. Though, speaking of the topic of saving people, there's the fact that you need to keep your partner safe as well. There will be multiple points in the game where your choice or lack thereof can result in your partner dying, leading to one of the bad endings. But if you save everybody and make it through the mansion together, then you will be rewarded for your troubles. Beating the game with saving both Barry and Chris or Rebecca and Jill will net you the special key, which unlocks the door to the wardrobe where you can change to your character's alternate costume. You can't change back after you put it on, so make sure you're ready to play as punk rocker Jill or biker gang Chris. But that's not the only reward you can get. Beat the game with Chris or Jill in under 3 hours and you will be given the rocket launcher with unlimited ammo. Very therapeutic, especially against those dang hunters. And finally, if you beat arranged mode with either Jill or Chris, you'll receive the cult python with unlimited ammo, adding another fun way to replay the game. So, the music. Well, much like a lot of things, the soundtrack was completely changed in the director's cut version. And honestly, I'm not too bummed about that, mainly because there's only a few tracks from the original soundtrack that I consider favorites. Meanwhile, there's a lot of good tracks in the director's cut soundtrack. Besides the ones you've heard during this video, there's Wesker is Missing, Save Room, and the guardhouse. Then there's the other reason I like this soundtrack. There's a lot of bad tracks in this version, but it's like laughably bad, like the kind of bad that makes you smile just by listening to it. Two important ones in particular are Yawn the Snake, because I literally have no idea what mood this track is trying to set. And my favorite track in the entire game, a track so terrible that it is infamous among the gaming community, ladies and gentlemen, The Mansion Basement. Now, you may be wondering how in the world this made it into an official, commercially available video game published by one of the biggest names in gaming at the time, and that's a bit of a funny story. See, this soundtrack was done by Mamoru Samuraguchi, and for a while he was considered the Japanese equivalent to Beethoven, seeing as he was able to make wondrous pieces of music, and he was also deaf. Thing was, in 2014, people found out that Mamoru not only wasn't deaf, he couldn't really compose music either. He had a ghostwriter by the name of Takashi Nigaki who did all the work. Now, as to how this got made, apparently Takashi was sick during the last days of production, and Mamoru had to complete the soundtrack, so out of fear of getting caught, he just did the remaining tracks himself, and this is the result. You know, it's just the trumpets and the tempo. If this track wasn't made with trumpets and not nearly this fast, then it probably could have been decent. Probably. Most likely not. So, here's the thing. While this game is labeled as survival horror, I've never found these games scary. Now, for the first game, that may not be surprising. The hammy voice acting and cheesy production values may have not been scary to a bunch of people back in the day. But I don't mean just the first game. Honestly, I find a lot of horror games pretty boring, with only a few exceptions, and Resident Evil is one of those exceptions. To me, these games are the gaming equivalent of B-movies. They're dumb, enjoyable romps that I could just pick up, play, and lose myself in the chaos. And I kinda wanna talk about why I love this dumb series every October, unless I already have something else planned. So next time, we'll be looking at Resident Evil 2, but until then, thank you all so much for watching, be safe out there, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Southside.